Hey, what's up everybody? My name is Kyle Ashcraft of Maxwell CPA Review, and I scored a 90 on the REG exam. And I'm here to tell you how I did it. We're going to talk about what topics on the REG exam you really need to focus on, and I'll give a few tips and tricks along the way. So with that, let's jump in. So I studied for REG over the course of 7 weeks while working a full-time job. I put in 2.5 hours each weeknight, and then during the weekends, I put in about 5 hours each day. So on the weekdays, I would be studying new content, and on the weekends, I would do as many practice problems as possible. So I ended up studying about 20 hours a week, and most sources recommend about 110 hours for REG, and I put in about 140. The REG exam has a lot of rules and a lot of details to memorize. The good news with all of that is that you don't have to memorize every single number because there are certain inflation adjusted numbers. So they're changing every year, and the exam is going to tell you what they are in the problem. These are for things like the standard deduction and 401k contribution limits. The REG exam is made up of two main sections. There's the taxation section, about 70% of the exam, and then the business law/ethics section, which makes up the other 30% of the exam. So with that, let's jump into the taxation section. The first section is on individual taxation. How do you, the individual, get taxed? The first big term is on AGI, adjusted gross income. This matters because it sets the limits for certain deductions and credits that you can take. So know what pre-AGI is versus post-AGI. The next is knowing the difference between a deduction and a credit, because even though they decrease your tax liability, they work quite differently. Know what the difference is between taking a standard deduction versus itemizing a deduction and what you're allowed to itemize. Next is about capital gains and capital losses. There are short-term ones and long-term capital gains and losses. And what happens if you have some long-term losses and some short-term gains? How do those go together? Then there's three major income buckets. You have your ordinary income, like for a W-2. You have passive income, like for a rental property. And then you have investment income, like for selling stocks. With passive losses, for example, you can't offset them against ordinary income. So it matters which kind of income it is. Next is on business taxation. So how do businesses get taxed? Well, it depends on what kind of business it is. There is a C Corp, an S Corp, an LLC, a partnership, and a sole proprietorship. Certain organizations like a C Corp has to pay taxes on its income. So the organization itself is paying taxes on the income. And then you have an S Corp, which is a pass-through entity. So basically the income gets passed through the company and goes to the individual tax returns. Within the topic of entity taxation, the topic of basis becomes really important, especially for S Corps and partnerships. Basis is basically what you can take out of the company without paying capital gains taxes on it. Basis at a basic level is what you've contributed to the company plus what the company has earned minus what you've already distributed out of the company. The next topic is on property transactions. So what happens when you sell the fixed assets that your company has? It really depends on how long you've had them for, what type of property it is, and then how much depreciation you've already taken on it. So for that, you need to know the difference between an ordinary asset, a 1231 asset, and a capital asset. So along with property transactions is how to depreciate property. There's three major ways to depreciate it. There's straight line depreciation, which is where you take how much you paid for it and then evenly depreciate it throughout its useful life. There is bonus depreciation, to where you get to depreciate the entire amount in the first year that you own it. And then there's Section 179, which is basically like bonus depreciation, but it has a few more rules and limits attached to it. So next is the ethics section. For this, we need to know about what are tax preparer penalties. So what can you be fined for and why? Next is what is the difference between negligence, gross negligence, and breach of contract? The last section of the exam is on business law. one of the first topics within business law is on contracts. So first, what makes a valid contract? And then how do you know when a contract is fulfilled? Sometimes you can have a verbal contract instead of a written one, so you need to know when you're allowed to have a verbal contract. Next is on assignment. Assignment is basically company A pays company B to do a job. And then company B, instead of doing the job themselves, they hire company C to do that job. Within the area of secured transactions, there is attachment and perfection. And then with bankruptcy, there is a hierarchy of who gets paid first in case a company goes bankrupt. So you need a general idea of who has the priority to that money. So that about covers it. I know we didn't go real in depth on any of the topics, but I just wanted to show you what I focused on. And if I got such good results from that, then I'm sure that you can as well. So if I can help at all, then please reach out. And if you're interested in my online private tutoring, then head to maxwellcpareview.com.